Welcome to Becoming Heisenberg. It's Entertainment Talks podcast for Breaking Bad on AMC and Netflix. I'm your host Matthew. Joining me today, my co-host is David. How are you today?
I'm good, thanks.
Good. We're here today to talk about season 1, episode 4 of Breaking Bad, called Cancer Man. What do you think of this episode?
It's an interesting one, this, because I like it, but it's kind of filling out the world a bit more, I think, rather than, there's not as many huge sort of action changing things. You're seeing a bit more kind of background and laying out a bit more about some of the other characters and stuff. It's not quite as Walton Jesse centered. You've got a lot more of the other characters in here as you're sort of getting the reveal of Walt telling people about the cancer diagnosis and stuff. So it's a sort of bit more world building than maybe some of the other episodes have, but it's still, I thought, a solid episode. Just slightly slower maybe than some of the others we've seen so far.
hmm I perhaps agree in some sort of way. This first season definitely is a set up sort of bit world building season and establishing the characters. I think there's two good parts to this episode that sort of help with that. I think the whole kind of, I guess, family scene with Walt and Skyler and Walt Jr. and
Yeah,
Hank and Maureen, you've got all of that family there, because you've either got brother-in-laws or brothers or husband and wife or son or what, that they're all connected in some way, shape or form. So that was a really good scene as well, and the whole cancer reveal stuff I thought was really good. So that worked really well. You've got two of Jesse's friends that are introduced. So I do like in a way how, because you kind of almost back to back see the different sort of lifestyles of these characters,
yeah,
where you've got this really the family barbecue centric sort of thing with Walt, and then you cut over to Jesse and he's with his two friends, and you got this whole drugs thing, and even
yeah.
just
Smoking meth.
yeah,
Yeah,
you look at even like the different styles of conversations, the different types of words that are being spoken and that, and you see like, okay, these two guys have somehow come together to work together, which neither of their friends or family know about, and you kind of see the different contrasts there. So I thought the episode did a really good job with that, because that's one way of kind of showing it off without even having the characters in the same scenes, and then they do come together later in a certain scenes, with the money discussion and that, and
yeah.
you kind of see how that comes together. So I thought that was good. I will say this as well, with this being, I think, my third watch of Breaking Bad, I'm liking, I mean, at least 4 episodes in, I'm liking Hank a lot more this time around. I mean, you see some changes with that kind of, maybe later. We won't get into that because that's more sort of future spoilery stuff. But there's something about, like, I mean, there is that thing still with Hank where, like, the way he sort of says to Walt in this episode, like, hey, if you do die or pass away, I'll be here for your family. And you kind of see, like, Walt's not really quite comfortable with that, and it's him sort
Yeah,
of trying to push his
it's
way in again and sort of like show him up in a
yeah,
certain way.
it, it's really yeah, and you can see how that Walt reacts
Yeah,
to
yeah.
that. It's not. It is a really interesting scene, that, because it's a beautiful bit of acting by Bryan Cranston, because that look says so much
Yeah, yeah.
of, it's just really, and I don't think it is Hank trying to sort of edge his way in particularly. I think he's genuinely trying to reassure Walt that, don't worry, if the worst happens, your family will be looked after. And but it's sort of, I don't think Hank realizes how emasculating that feels to Walt,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
because it's Walt's job to look after his own family, and you're sort of implying that he won't, he might not be able to do that. And there's so much that goes on in it's a couple of seconds of that look that you get of Walt is just, it's such a masterful bit of acting,
hmm
just face acting that.
Yeah, because you can see such a contrast between Hank and Walt themselves. Hank loves his job, loves working with his mate at
Mm,
work. He gets on relatively well with his wife and that. And then you look at Walt. He used to enjoy his job a lot. The chemistry stuff, and you saw that with the flashback last week with Gretchen. Um,
yeah,
And then you cut to now where like he, quit his car washing job. He hates that. He's not getting along well with his wife. His son doesn't really like him that much, as we see in the episode. And he's kind of going through more of a midlife crisis. Whereas Hank's like, yeah, I love my job. I love taking these people down. My wife's there supporting me. I can somehow actually talk to both at the same time in certain scenes. And you can see the contrast between there, which I think is really cool as well. So overall, I do agree with what you're saying in a certain way. It does kind of slow down things a little bit, but to me, it's much more of a sort of, okay, you're introduced to Jesse's new friend, or introduced to his friends for the first time, and then you see the contrast between him and Walt's family as well, which I found really interesting. So
I mean. Yeah, it's not necessarily a criticism of it being, it being a slower episode. More an observation. I mean, at some point you do need to build out these worlds, and you need episodes like this to do that. I think. It did feel like, compared to the other two episodes where they're dealing with dead bodies and they're cooking and all that sort of stuff. It did feel like a slower episode, but I think you also need to have a bit of breathing space maybe before the next big thing happens, and you need that time to be able to introduce a few characters and build out the world a bit more. So.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of breathing space as well, I mean, Walt just killed someone for the first time. And now, you're having these establishing sort of quieter scenes where like there's still dramatic things happening. I mean, like you're talking about the main character potentially dying from cancer and how that affects the family and that. So you're dealing with different stuff this week. But So anyway, I thought it was a good.
Yeah, one thing I wasn't sure about, and I honestly can't remember. Did we ever find out what happened to Crazy Eight's body? Because they had the whole thing with them dealing with the cousin's body, and then now they've just murdered Crazy Eight as well, and the body's gone when Jesse gets back to the house, and I can't remember whether we ever find out what happened with that.
No, I don't remember them establishing that either, but I don't know, maybe Walt just took care of it in the proper way as opposed to what Jesse did. I don't know.
Quite possibly, yeah. I mean, there is possibly that. It just, given that they made such a big thing of the one body, you do wonder why they decided not to do anything about Crazy Eight's body.
Yeah, I suppose so. So, we'll see where that ends up going. But, that's pretty much all the pre-talk we want to do. Let's get into the episode.
Hey guys, what's up? This is Donnie, and I host the Adulting with Donnie podcast. And this is not the show to listen to if you're trying to be a better adult. I started this podcast as a way to offload some thoughts that I have throughout the week. My topics vary widely every week. Movies I've seen, guns and gun control, sex, people that are stupid, why I don't care about celebrity opinions, TV shows, snowmobiling. The list goes on and on. I'm always taking topic suggestions from fans of the show too. So join me each week on Adulting with Donnie as I pour some bourbon and allow you to see the inner workings of the mind of a madman. Live free and rant hard.
I'm Christy.
And I'm Jackie.
And we are Killer Fun. We explore the intersection of crime and entertainment every other week.
For as long as people have been communicating, they have been talking about who did what to whom, and is that socially acceptable?
Because the boundaries of society,
crime,
and entertainment have always gone hand in hand.
The more salacious,
or weird,
the better. From books and movies
to television shows and games,
we look at how life and art imitate and inform one another.
And we can't get together and not laugh. So let's face it, there's going to be laughing.
Killer Fun is available anywhere you listen to podcasts, so join us.
Today's sponsor is Kualu. If you'd like to get started with a domain name and a website today, just click on the link in the show notes and that will take you over to Kualu to get started. They also have a live support chat system that you can use, which is in the bottom right hand corner. So get started with a new website and domain name today with Kualu. Hey everybody, if you would like to get the ad-free versions of all of our podcasts and support Entertainment Talk along the way, all you need to do is head over to patreon.com/entertainment talk. Sign up either as a creator or as a Patreon. There's no difference there. That's just the option for either becoming a creator now or just staying as a patron for the moment. And then all you need to do is support us at the $1 level tier. That will get you access to all of the ad-free podcasts that we've done in the past. and get you access to all the ad-free podcasts in that month as well. So it's a great way to support us on Entertainment Talk and to get rid of the ads and get your ad-free podcasts. You can also become a patron at the $3 level tier. That gets you access to ad-free podcasts and allows you to redeem a review of a TV show or a film of entirely your choice. That's one per month for either a TV show or a film review, which is at the $3 level tier. As always, thank you very much for listening. Back to the show. So Hank and his DEA team have a meeting over the disappearance of Emilio and Crazy 8, speaking of the two of those characters you just mentioned, the latter of whom is revealed to have been their informant. Hank also reports on the discovery of a of 99.1% pure methamphetamine. Although the DEA has no leads, Hank believes the product is good enough to make someone Albuquerque's new meth kingpin. And as he's saying this, we cut over to Walt brushing his teeth. As the audience, we know that it's him, and Hank has no idea, of course. Neither does really anybody else at this point. So, again, a good kind of contrast as like, okay, you do have this whole awkward situation where obviously Walt knows, you know, his brother's a DEA agent. Jesse, I'm pretty sure, knows that as well. And you're getting this scene where, like, Walt's not really aware that this is happening necessarily. And, you know, he's got this situation to deal with where he knows the chemistry, Jesse knows the business, therefore they started this deal, but then he knows obviously that his brother is a DEA agent, which has been a problem since the beginning. So it's an interesting contrast between the two of them. Again, kind of showing in a way like Hank clearly loves this. He loves, you know, looking for people and hunting people down and trying to work out like, okay, who's this new guy? Where's this, you know, pure meth come from and all that? And then we see Walt, who's kind of like still in his kind of moody sort of state or whatever, in his midlife crisis kind of like state. So again, literally in the first scene they kind of showed the different contrast between the two of them, which I think is really cool. So yeah, just I don't know what it is. There's something about I guess this earlier version, I suppose, of Hank. I'm just enjoying him, kind of enjoying his job and you know, trying to look for people and that sort of thing. So it's pretty good. What do you think of this?
Yeah, I thought the cut to Walt, particularly at the end of it, was just lovely. It's and good, yeah. I like the fact that they have little funny moments like that in this. You know, it's the humour is generally quite dark, but there are some great humorous moments in that, and I thought that was one of them. The editing, actually, and the direction in this episode, I thought was superb. You know, there's some great little bits and pieces that they utilise in at various points, you know, just cleverly put in cuts and stuff like that. I thought they did a really amazing job with it this time. I mean, it's generally good throughout, but I particularly noticed it this episode. Mm-hmm. But yes, this opening scene, I do like Hank as a character. I find him very watchable, and just, yeah, like you say, he loves his job. He loves what he's doing. He loves getting bad guys. And you know, you see later on when he finds out about the cancer diagnosis, he sort of doesn't quite know how to handle that, and he's having to be kind of softer than he usually is, and yeah. I don't think that sits that comfortably with him either. So yeah, it's really interesting, and it's great to see him in this sort of in this meeting, and yeah, the end of that scene I just thought was great.
Yeah, it's good with the editing and cutting to Walt afterwards and all that sort of thing. But yeah, you can just see. I mean, it comes from Dean Norris's acting, just the determination on his face of like, I'm gonna catch this guy, and I'm gonna enjoy it when I do. Because you got slightly smaller scenes last week of like, okay, him competing with Gomez or Gomi. To like find the meth or whatever in the car, and then this like full on, okay, we're doing a manhunt basically of like, okay, who is this new guy? And Crazy 8 and Emilio have gone and they've disappeared. They don't know yet that they're dead, obviously, but no, it's a good opening scene. So especially to set what happens later in the episode as well. So meanwhile, Walt tells Hank, Marie, and Walt Jr. about his cancer, and Skylar was told in the previous off-screen scene as well. We got the ending of last week's episode, which is him saying to Skylar, I need to tell you something. Obviously it was that, and then we cut to this scene with all of them basically having this family barbecue style type of thing, and Skylar just starts crying. And Walt sort of sits there and is just, really nervous, and then she walks off, and then she says, ask him, meaning Walt, and then, he tells them about what's going on.
Yeah, that again was quite an interesting scene because, she breaks down into tears, walks off, and you have this quizzical kind of look from Marie, who's, obviously there's a certain amount of concern and anger, and with maybe a potential little bit of anger in there because she doesn't know what Walt has done. And when she walks off, you kind of like, well, has he had an affair? Is he, there's a whole range of things that he might have done. Has he blown all their money on something?
It's usually one of those two things. He's affair, or like he's, I don't know, got a gambling problem or a drinking problem, or something like that.
So you don't really know, and then of course he comes out and says he's got cancer. And I thought again, Hank's reaction here was, there was a great reaction shot of Dean Norris on sat at the table on that, and I thought that worked really well.
Mm-hmm.
It's just an interesting little scene, that, and you've also got the little kind of bickering between Hank and Walt when Walt's cooking and he kind of phases out for a second, and then Hank comes over and talks about him burning the chicken, and then sort of shouts across to Skylar, "Hey, have you got any more chicken? Walt's going to need some more." So there's more kind of ribbing and stuff there, which sort of shows that relationship a bit more as well. So it's all good stuff of sort of building what the relationships are between these characters.
Mm-hmm. I do find it specifically interesting with Walt Jr. how, like, in these, because after he tells everyone, and then you get the little cut of Walt Jr. in his room listening to music, obviously trying to, like, I don't know, calm himself down or process or think, or a combination of all of those things. And then you get this separate scene later, which we'll get into later, with him kind of confronting his dad about it, and then you get the scene even later on when they talk about, like, the money for the cancer treatment and stuff. I do kind of like how they separated that a little bit, and it's, at first it's like, because you don't get really any reaction from Walt Jr., and then you cut to the scene with him in his bedroom kind of processing things, or whatever's kind of going through his mind, and then you get the more kind of, the louder character of the group, which is Hank, him kind of sitting down with Walt and having this sort of brotherly conversation, and then you get the whole look of, like, when he says, don't worry, if you die or whatever, I'll take care of your family. And then, like you said, with the whole, I guess, alpha male thing kind of coming into it and whatnot, you see that that dagger sort of look from Walt of, like, oh great, you're kind of gonna step in as the man, the man of the family or whatever, and like take care of everything because I won't be able to, and like you kind of said in the little pre-talk thing, in a way, this is Hank trying to sort of softer sort of say, like, because he's usually, this very out there kind of character, and he's very loud and all that, and in this scene he has to be, a lot calmer and sort of change himself a little bit, or just be a little bit different towards his brother. And he's not trying to be this sort of brooding man in a way of being like, I'm going to take care of your family. It's from Hank, it's meant to come across as like, look, this is bad and all that, and like, I'm going to subtly take care of your family, but Walt doesn't quite see it that way. And you understand why, because, like, as you saw in the pilot episode, when he's kind of showing him up on his birthday and, like, oh, the gun's heavy for you and all that sort of thing, and how that kind of comes together in this scene, I think is told really, really well. So what do you think of that?
Yeah, no, definitely. No, I mean, I think sort of throughout it's been pretty good. And the stuff with Walt Jr., as you said, the later on stuff where he confronts him, I thought was really quite interesting. But we'll talk about that a bit more when we get to that scene, I think.
Yep. Let's switch to our other character. Jesse smokes Walt's meth with two friends and flees his house the next morning when he hallucinates two religious evangelists at his door. But he sees them as armed bikers with grenades and machetes, and
this This was another little kind of really nice bit of editing, I thought, here, where you see the sort of paranoia and they're kind of quick cutting and kind of time jumping what he sees. And I thought that was quite a nice way of showing him clearly in the midst of this like drug-induced paranoia. But yeah, I'd forgotten about that scene. I really like that. I thought that was because I was, they were walking towards him and like, I don't remember this. And then, oh yes, I do. Yeah.
Yeah. One thing I specifically wrote down as well. I thought this was a great response from Jesse because he's nervous about trying to explain what's going on. Badger asks about Jesse about the ceiling, and Jesse says the house is settling.
Yeah,
that was pretty funny. Yeah, that's really what's going on.
Just don't question it. Yeah, the two of the guys are too stupid to go, wait a minute. They kind of, I mean, they kind of roll with it and just don't go, you've got a massive hole in the ceiling. What are you talking about? Yeah.
The house is settling. That's such a brilliant response. Yeah. And like I said about this, we'll talk about the bikers and Jesse kind of running away in a minute. I just love the difference in dialogue here, like the words they're using, and the way they talk, and even like the state of the house as compared to Walt's house as well. It's not one that's like looked after particularly, and there's like stuff everywhere, and even just as far as like I suppose the lighting as well. I mean, this isn't a place that Jesse wants to be well lit because he doesn't want people to go there and find all sorts of things, probably, like the hole in the ceiling and the weed and all sorts of the drugs that are there. So there's a lot of different contrast between this just like the general presentation of the scene and how the characters act and then that sort of thing with Jesse compared to Walt. So I thought that was really good as well. You meet I'm sure it's Badger and Skinny Pete are in this scene as well. So we get introduced to them for the first time. So like we said earlier, this is kind of a establishing episode as well. This is the first time we meet those characters.
It's not Badger, actually. Is it not Badger? Is it? It is. No, it's Skinny Pete, definitely. Yeah. And I'm not sure who the other character was.
Is Badger the other one then? Badger's one. Yeah,
Badger is one of the other friends, but that wasn't Badger. It was one of his other mates. But I didn't remember him particularly. But
it's a bit more of a smaller character. But no, I thought this was a good scene. And like I said, you can just see the differences between the two of them. So speaking about just a very comedic scene with these bikers and that, we see that it's just these religious people with a leaflet and that. But in a way, as clumsy as Jesse can kind of be, and him kind of fumbling his way through with the explanation of kind of what's going on, and obviously his friends here aren't really kind of like paying attention much and that sort of thing, because no one questions him about like the house is settling and that sort of thing. It is interesting in a way of he thinks he sees these two bikers who are clearly coming to kill him, or at least from what Jesse thinks he's seeing. And he has like this stuff in his speakers and that, and he's ready to just like jump over the wall, and he's clearly got a plan in place. And for as clumsy as a character as Jesse can be, which we saw with the whole box thing and making a hole in his ceiling and all that sort of stuff, it is quite interesting to see that Jesse does have this plan in place. He's not entirely he's not incompetent. He's just kind of clumsy and silly in a certain way. What do you think of Jesse's kind of plan here?
Well, I mean, I think plan is possibly slightly too strong a word for it. I think he has a very, very, very strong sense of self-preservation, more than anything else. And I don't think he necessarily has a solid plan as such. I think he just knows where his drugs is. He knows that his drugs are easily accessible. He can get out of the house, and I don't know whether going to his parents were his first choice or whether he drove around a bit and then thought that was kind of where I can go in an emergency. So I'm not sure. Combo Ortega, by the way, I think is the other guy.
Combo.
That's in that scene. Who is in the first few seasons, and does actually have quite a key role, I think, later on.
Yeah.
But yes, it's Combo, I think, is the other character in that scene.
So Combo, Badger, and Skinny Pete. So
yeah.
but we meet the two of them there. So do you think I'm giving Jesse too much credit here, possibly?
I think so. I think it is less of a plan and more just a very, very strong sense of self-preservation more than anything else. You know, and it's his house. He knows where everything is. He knows how he can escape out of it. And remember, he's high as anything at the time as well. So, you know, but I think it's just him knowing his way around and, you know, having the foresight to grab his drugs as well. So,
yeah. I mean, if he like needs to leave in an emergency and he does need to get money down the line, at least he's got like something he can try to sell, I suppose, which is, I guess, part of the maybe sort of plan. Cool, that's that scene as well. So good stuff there with Jesse, and good kind of comparison between Jesse and Walt, just such a difference between the two of them. Moving back to Walt's family, Skylar makes an appointment with one of the top oncologists, I think that's how you say that word, in the country, even though the family can't afford him, but she's sort of trying to inquire or figure it out later. Walt says he will take the money out from his pension, but he actually uses some of the money taken from Crazy 8 in the desert, which he keeps hidden in an air conditioning duct or vent thing at his house. As he's doing this, as he's getting the money or trying to sort it out, and he loses some of it or whatever, Walt Jr. berates his father for acting weird and nonchalant about his cancer, so he's just sort of confused about his dad's attitude about the whole thing. We'll talk about this guy Ken in a minute as well, and his kind of what happens there. Like I said, really interesting kind of separate way to have the confrontation between Walt and his son Walt Jr. as well. You know, he's kind of almost not dismissed in the earlier scene, but he's not in that earlier scene when they're in the front room or and that sort of thing, and you get the glimpse of, like, you know, like I said, with him listening to music and stuff, but he does go and confront his dad later, and I quite like the scene, because even though as much of a major character as Walt Jr. is, he's not involved in as much as what you might kind of expect, at least from sort of like what I remember. He's sort of like one of them characters that like sits on the sidelines a little bit, but then when he comes out to say something, it's quite meaningful, like his conversation here with his dad, and like his what he says later on about the cancer treatment and all that. But yeah, he catches kind of Walt off guard, I suppose, and Walt's trying to sort of just say like, hey, what's going on, and just try and have a normal conversation, and then he kind of comes out with that. So interesting stuff. What do you think of the conversation and relationship here?
Yeah, I think it's interesting when you get this sort of stuff from Walt Jr., because this is a kid who's had to fight his entire life. You know, he's got cerebral palsy, and you know, he understands that every day is a struggle, and you have to fight things. And then you've got, you know, his dad gets this cancer diagnosis, and Walt's not getting kind of mad or doesn't appear to be getting kind of mad or angry about it. And when they're talking about the doctor stuff later on, I entirely get why he blows at him at that point, you know, because it's almost insulting to Walt Jr. You know, I think Walt Jr. is like, I'm bored with this thing. I've had to survive with it every single day, and, you know, I have to fight to do things. And you're basically arguing about the money for the doctors, and you're prepared to basically roll over and die. And, you know, you don't seem to be wanting to fight for yourself. And that is almost a personal insult to Walt Jr., you know. To Junior, he's really, I really get why it's quite a nice bit of writing that. I get why he's so angry and annoyed about it, because not only is he potentially going to lose his father doesn't seem to want to fight for it, and yeah, that I think it's quite interesting the way, as you say, they kind of slot this in at various points in the episode, and you sort of see the anger build as every time they come to him, and, you know, even the bit where he's just sat on the bed with the headphones, you can see that's him sort of sat there processing, you know. No,
it's great stuff from is it RJ Mitt? Is that his name?
Yes.
Yeah. It's great acting from him, and like you kind of said last week, he really doesn't get. I mean, when people talk about the acting performances of Breaking Bad, his name just doesn't really come up a whole lot. It's usually, well, certain actors who are in the show later. You probably know who I'm talking about, and obviously with Aaron Paul and Bryan Cranston and everybody. So it's pretty good stuff from there. Walt, when Walt goes to his credit union to put the cash in a cashier's check, his parking spot is stolen by a rich, obnoxious man named Ken. Ken annoys Walt and the rest of the customers with his loud, obnoxious, and inappropriate cell phone conversation. So that's kind of planting the seed for later on. This guy is just he doesn't care what he says around anybody, and there could be kids in this building, or there could be anybody in this building, and yeah, even as far as like the people at the tills who are having conversations, it's like, okay, I want to put this in this account and whatever, and he's just walking around. He's probably, and I'm gonna relate this to modern day. He's probably somebody that wouldn't wear a mask. Definitely. Yeah.
Yes,
he's probably. I mean, he's probably somebody like he wouldn't distance. He wouldn't wear a mask. He would just probably be. I mean, I saw someone in the shop like that last week. So yeah.
He's. I mean, it's difficult to tell exactly what he does, but he's talking about having access to some of the best lawyers and all this sort of stuff, and
he's saying about like, oh, if I left this firm and just walked through into this one, I would get like $40,000 or whatever. So yeah, you can see again. Speaking of like
douchebag.
Yeah, speaking of contrast, you can see like, okay, Walt's trying to desperately get this money, and this guy's just like blabbing about how rich he is and how great he is, and again, looks wise from Bryan Cranston, acting as Walter here. You can see it coming around again. You kind of saw it a little bit earlier with the Hank scene, and you can definitely see it this time with Ken. So we'll put a pin in that and then get to that with some flaming cars later.
should mention the character of Ken. I was looking up some background on the episode. The character of Ken, I'd forgotten or just hadn't realised, pops up in Better Call Saul in episode 2.1 of he apparently pops up in Better Call Saul as well.
Okay. Huh.
I'm guessing it's just a sort of cameo thing with him doing the same sort of thing, because I don't remember particularly, but yeah, it's the same. It's the same Ken Wins character. So
yes, his number plate in it. Ken Wins.
Yeah.
You just have to look at that sort of number plate and you know what type of person that is.
Yeah, so, exactly.
Yeah, you put your own name Wins on your own car, which he doesn't have later on. So we'll talk about that later. Jesse ends up fleeing to his parents' house, like we discussed earlier, where he sleeps for an entire day. He attempts to bond with his overachieving little brother, Jake. That night, Jesse gets a phone call from one of the friends who smoked Walt's meth, who says that he knows a lot of wealthy people who are looking to score drugs and are willing to pay top dollar for the high-quality meth he cooked, the 99.1% thing. The next day, Jesse visits. We'll talk about that later, actually. So you get this whole thing with Jesse and his parents, and he's kind of trying to make this conversation about like, oh, you got new patio, and my foot's stuck in one of them. I mean, he doesn't say that, but his foot gets stuck in it, and it creates this like awkward scene for him. And yeah, you get the mother basically who's sort of saying about like, okay, should we give him another chance? We've done this again, and you can tell this has probably been happening for quite a few years. And you look at the difference between like, okay, you've got his little brother who's like, okay, he's doing soccer practice and he's got all these trophies and stuff, and Jesse's the brother that dropped out of school or got thrown out of school or whatever, and didn't really achieve much. And I really like the scene in Jake's bedroom where he's like looking at the different trophies and stuff, and he's trying his hardest to just make some sort of bond or relationship with Jake, and you can just see the differences between them. One's this like underachieving kind of drug dealer and all that sort of thing, and then you've got Jake who's much younger in his life and has probably already done more with his life than what Jesse has, and you can just see the differences between them, which I think is quite interesting. And even as far as like before Jesse actually gets there, the conversation between the parents and Jake, and then the conversations between the parents and Jesse as well. You can kind of see that as well. So I thought this was good. You've got like family stuff from both sides in this episode. You've got the family stuff with Walt, and then you've got the completely different family stuff with Jesse and his family. I thought it was great. So what do you think of this first scene with them? Because we do have a bit later on as well.
Yeah, the introduction into this, I like the sort of, let's just say he climbs over the wall, or comes into the garden. It's like, oh, you've got new patio furniture, and gets tangled up in it, which is a great sort of little introduction, because it does imply that he hasn't been there for quite a while, and the patio furniture that he's presumably landed on after climbing into the garden, wasn't there the last time he was there. So I quite like that as a sort of little opening thing that sort of gives you an idea that he's not been there very often. And you've got this huge juxtaposition between the parents' family, then you've got Waltz, and then you've got Jesse, and there's the interesting sort of difference of arguably I think Jesse's parents are probably better off than Walt's family. They certainly seem to be in a bigger house and far more affluent, and you've got this sort of these interesting kind of different looks at different levels of society there, and it just it's weird that Jesse seems to come from that sort of thing, but then he is living in, what was it, his grandmother's or his aunt's house or something that he's inherited, and that's where he's so there was clearly sort of early on there was some sort of money floating around in that family. But the conversations with the little brother, who particularly when you were first introduced to him, where they're kind of arguing about discussing whether he should go with the what was it, the oboe or the piccolo, I think were the things that he was sort of which should he be playing, because he's so awesome at both, and it's just sort of interesting seeing that whilst the parents mean well, there is obviously quite a lot of pressure, and they have this conversation that between Jake and Jesse, which was this really nice sort of moment between the two of them, where Jesse mentions Jake being the favourite son, and Jake's like, "You're kidding me, aren't you? All they do is talk about you." This. I thought that's kind of quite interesting, just to show that the parents, well, on the surface, they should be great parents. Clearly, they've been making mistakes going along with these kids, because they're over-pressuring the younger kid as a sort of compensating for the fact that they screwed up or Jesse got screwed up so badly for whatever reason. It's just a really interesting dynamic there, I think.
Mm-hmm. I still to this day would really, you couldn't do it with Brian and Aaron, but I would really like to see, I don't know if it'd be like a whole series or maybe like an El Camino film style type of thing. I'd really like to see a prequel thing with, okay, what did happen with Jesse at school, and how was that related? Because we've heard about it and there's been conversations about it between various different characters, but I'd kind of like to, I mean, it probably would fit with like a 2-hour El Camino style type of thing, but I would quite like to see that as well, because we've discussed a lot of times in Better Call Saul, the Saul Goodman prequel as well, about like, okay, what other little stories could you tell in this world and that sort of thing, and that's one I'd still like to see, but I just don't really think you can do it with Aaron and with Brian, and then you've got to get into the difficult thing about like, okay, who's going to play the younger versions of those characters, and then that's always going to be you're never going to satify everyone with that answer.
Yeah, the difficulty is you could probably play it with Brian. It would be focused around Jesse, I think, because what you'd be looking at is Jesse's descent from coming from that family to descending to becoming the drug dealer. So it's that sort of trajectory you're following, and I think you could put Bryan Cranston in there because you could de-age him reasonably well, I think. I think maybe it's more difficult to do that with Aaron Paul. I don't think it's necessarily impossible. It just you maybe would have to have a younger version, and maybe Aaron Paul playing a kind of older version. It depends how much of his life you're going to show, really. Maybe you could you could have a mix, but I don't know. That would be quite an interesting little story. I think, like you say, not a full series, maybe a movie, but that would be an interesting little bit to see of sort of how Jesse went from coming from that affluent family to descending into the drug dealer. So
yeah, that's something I've always wanted to see. So who knows what the future holds? It's up to Vince and Peter probably. So because I'm sure Brian and Aaron will be up for doing it. It just depends on if they actually ever decided to create that, but we'll see. The next day, Jesse visits Walt to, quote, touch base, but kicks Jesse out. Jesse then gives Walt half of his meth profit, the 4,000, which he uses later as well. Yeah, interesting scenes with the two of them. Like we've just had in this episode a bunch of different family and friends scenes where you've seen the different contrast between the two of them. Then they actually come back together again to kind of have this argument sort of conversation about like, okay, what do we do next? And Jesse kind of mentioning about his friend, some people that he works with and his friends, they're really interested in the meth, and Walt's just like not having any of it. And it was a good kind of great little sort of scene between the two of them. And then just and then just the sort of almost sarcastic way of like, okay, I do have your money here, I didn't just waste it all, and then just kind of throws it at him. So I thought that was great.
I was gonna say Walt doesn't so much give as throw like $4,000 at him. It is a really interesting scene because you think about it from Walt's point of view. He's like, they killed two people. I mean, they were drug dealers, but they did kill two people in the course of cooking that meth.
Their first
deal, it's his very first deal. It did not in any way go smoothly. They potentially almost got caught by the cops. Certainly he thought they were going to be. It was, they cooked the stuff, but then they end up having to kill two people, and he's been held at gunpoint, and they had to chain one up. I mean, the litany of things that went wrong. And then Jesse shows up and goes, hey, well, if you'd like to cook some more, I'm just saying, I know people, we could sell it. And you're like, get out. You sort of, I mean, it's crazy that, it's almost crazy that like Jesse would actually go back to him and say, oh yeah, but do you want to cook again after everything that's happened? But Jesse wants the money. He knows the product's good and he wants more of it. So
yeah. It's good. It's a good scene between the two of them. Especially like you kind of build up to it in a different way. Of like you see what's going on in their lives individually, and then they still basically do need each other at the end of the day to make these deals kind of go forward in that. So I thought it was a good scene, and as always, great acting from Aaron Paul and Bryan Cranston. So good stuff. The oncologist tells Walt that the cancer has spread to his lymph nodes. I think that's how you say that. But there is a chance that that it's still treatable with chemotherapy, basically. And in this scene, you kind of get, this really hopeful kind of version of Skylar, where she's like, doing the tap on Walt's leg and that, and like, hey, look, it's gonna work. And you can just see again this kind of doubt on Walt's face, and he's kind of starting to think about the money and everything that's kind of going on. He's got chemo and he's not getting on with his son, and he's just had this conversation with his drug dealer, and that's not going well, and he's kind of got this like secret money kind of hanging around and that. So I thought that was an interesting little scene. But yeah, I mean, in the show, at a lot of different points, Walt's cancer is a little bit more quiet, but it is one of the main thrusts of the series. I think I remember when you said, what was it in the pilot episode, about like if he has free healthcare like we do in the UK, then maybe the whole series doesn't happen. And this is going back to that basically.
Yeah, this series would not exist in the UK. You could, I mean, this would be a half-hour episode if you made it in the UK. Because it's like, I've got cancer. Okay, then go to the doctors and get chemotherapy. Yeah, I mean, it's something that could only really happen in the US.
Because the only thing you'd really get is like the characters battle with the cancer. You wouldn't get any of the money making, drug dealing meths. You wouldn't get any of that.
it will be a very sad series about a chemistry teacher battling cancer. I mean,
Yeah,
that's all it would be.
Mhm.
It would you wouldn't have any of the drug dealing stuff in there because there's no reason for it to be there because he doesn't need to make the money. So
Yeah. So what do you think of the scene with the doctor here, or the oncologist?
reasonable little scene. It's more the stuff that comes after this, I think. I mean, you get to sort of start of you. It's this sort of thing with Skylar being kind of quite upbeat, and Walt clearly is just sort of concerned about how much is this going to cost? Am I going to leave my family in debt? And this is. That's his kind of main concern, which should never be your concern when you're there for cancer treatment. That should be the last thing you need to be worried about, know?
Yeah, more about your survival and health and
Yeah.
whatnot. So, speaking of that next scene, at home, Walt expresses his doubts about the chemo since it will cost around $90,000, and if he still dies, he will leave the family with all that debt. Walt Jr., hinting at the scene that we've hinted at earlier, goes into his dad saying that, if you're not going to do this, you should just kind of die now instead of going through all of this. And speaking about his attitude and stuff. So we've referenced this scene quite a lot already in the podcast, but yeah, as you said, with him dealing with, is it cerebral palsy? Is that how you say it?
Cerebral palsy, yeah.
Cerebral palsy, and him he's been fighting with that all his life, and his dad's just got this concern about, like, okay, if this is going to cost all this and then we actually do pay it and I still do die, and Walt Jr. just comes out with, like, okay, you might as well just kind of die now then. It's an out there kind of scene, and you do see, obviously, with more with Skylar's reaction. She's the more kind of one of the more emotional characters in the scene, and she just kind of can't believe what her son's just come out with, and you can see again on Walt's face about, like, okay, he gets what his son is kind of pointing out, but there's a lot of different points in it. I think there's probably 3 or 4 different points in this episode with Walt and just his facial reactions to lots of different things, like Hank, and then this Ken guy at the bank and all that, and then again with the oncologist, and then again with Walt Jr. in this scene. So it's one that's quite out there, but I guess Walt Jr.'s right in a certain way, and especially in terms of his fight with what he's been dealing with. So it's a scene we already talked about a little bit, but any other thoughts on it?
No, I mean, yeah, we have talked about this a little bit so far, and I think again it's RJ Mitt's sort of delivery of it, and just the anger that you've seen with Walt Jr. build throughout the whole episode, and then it just kind of pours out at this point. Because as I say, I think that the fact that Walt is kind of even, considering not really fighting, or he's concerned about the money, and he's not kind of thinking, I will do anything to get through this. He's almost a personal insult to Walt Jr. I think he's because this is a kid that's fought every day to get up and do things. And we've seen little glimpses of this when he's like in the changing room in the previous episodes, and stuff like that. You've seen little bits of what just day-to-day struggle things are for him. And then his dad's got this diagnosis, and he's either seems to be ignoring it, or he's just he's not putting up the fight that Walt Jr. wants to see.
Yeah,
and it just blows in him, and it's just I think it's really it's quite shocking when it comes out, but the more you look at it, the more you think, I can understand why he's so angry.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the fact that Walt Jr. his dad isn't reacting the way he wants him to, and the way he should be, because the difference of fight between the two of them, I suppose. So that's that. At the Pinkman residence, a housekeeper finds a joint in Jesse's room, resulting in his parents kicking him out. It turns out that the joint belonged to Jake, who thanks Jesse for taking the fall for him. While Jesse is waiting for his cab outside, after his parents kick him out for the marijuana, Jake comes out asking for his joint back, which Jesse throws on the floor, stumps, and he says something like it was only skunk weed, I think he says. And kind of does him a favour, because he doesn't give him back the thing to smoke with, which who knows what kind of path that could lead down. I mean, Jesse's made
Yeah.
the right decision here because he knows his brother's got this bright future, and he doesn't want, you know, drugs to be thrown into the mix with that and that sort of thing. And I can't remember if we see more of Jake or the parents later. I can't specifically remember, but
We-
it's Jesse helping
we
his
see-
brother to continue on the good path that he's on. So
I can't remember whether we see Jake again. We do see the parents again, I think, at some point.
possibly,
But yeah, it's sort of, it is. I mean, Jesse's doing the right thing, but again, it's an interesting thing of sort of showing this rich, affluent family, and you know, they're seemingly doing all the right things, but they're piling way too much pressure onto this kid.
yeah.
And weed is the way that he seems to like to react. And I mean, you know, relax. And Jake's got what? He can't have been more than what, 12 with that.
I was gonna say
It's
around that
crazy.
age, yeah,
Yeah.
roughly.
So
Sort of young
yeah.
teenager. He's probably in.
Yeah.
I was gonna say secondary school. I don't know what they call that in the US because
Yeah.
they've got
12,
grades
13,
or whatever, haven't they?
maybe.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
But,
So probably in the sort of slightly later stages of some of his education, or sort of the middle stages of it, maybe.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a good decision here from Jesse. I think this is one of the best things he's done in the series so far, given all the clumsy mistakes he's already made, and you know, he's kind of made a little bit of a fool of himself going back to his parents and all that sort of thing. And yeah, you get, you know, early in the episode where he sees all of what his brother has achieved, and he was typing that stuff on the laptop or whatever, and just wants to put his brother back on the right, or continue to put him on the right path. So I thought that was good as well. So that's pretty much that scene. He leaves, and then that's pretty much that. Let's move on to Walt suffers a coughing attack. Always at just inconvenient moments as well, when he's like, you know, trying to take care of Crazy Eight, when he's trying to chase Jesse, and all sorts of different scenes. So he's coughing while driving, and also coughs up blood this time. I think that's the first time he's coughed up blood in the series so far. As he pulls into a gas station, he notices Ken pulling up again. When Ken leaves his car unattended, an angry Walt takes it says squidgy here, pops open the Ken's hood and shorts the battery the car battery with it. The battery subsequently overheats and explodes the whole car as Walt goes back to his car and drives off, and Ken's pretty shocked. So great scene, really, really great scene, and this is Walt's anger coming out, and one of the interesting discussions to kind of attach to this is a lot of people ask, like, okay, when did Walt break bad? And because obviously, you know, the whole Breaking Bad, the name of the series, and that, and when does he break bad and, you know, become Heisenberg, hence also the name of the podcast. I think we'll maybe notice some more definitive moment or scene perhaps later on. I don't think this is him breaking bad here. There's a lot of different checkpoints maybe that lead up to that in terms of him doing certain things. This is maybe one of them that adds up to it, but I don't think this is like the moment necessarily that he's broken bad. So what do you think?
I mean, we've had one moment maybe before this where, which is the point where he slightly turns on Skylar when she's having the baby scan.
Right.
And there's anger that comes out there, and there's this incident. I mean, of course, remember Linda last week, he did actually kill somebody, but in that particular incident, he's being forced into it in the same way that and he was scared, and he was forced. That actually was more a self-preservation thing. You know, he was very much forced into doing that. That wasn't him breaking bad in any particular way. It was, you know, he did what he had to do to survive, but he was very much pushed into that corner. Whereas this is a pure act of vengeance. So yeah, this is one of the early kind of signs of it. Somebody I noted in some of the notes I was looking at did point out, for the car nerds among you, that particular model of car, the battery is in the wrong place. The battery would actually be in the trunk of the car, not in the front. But that's a very minor point, I think. And it's perfectly fine.
I'm not a car person, so I wouldn't.
Yeah, neither am I particularly. I just happened to read that on one of the forums. But
cool.
But yes, it's I really like this scene though. I think it is this great example of you just start to see him take his anger out on other people, you know,
Yeah.
which is I mean, not that guy didn't deserve it. He's a dick, but
Yeah, because again, he's driving in, being loud, obnoxious, and all that. So yeah, but Ken will be fine. I'm pretty sure he can.
Yeah.
Well, seemingly from his conversations, he can certainly afford a new car, so there's no problem.
absolutely, yes.
So, yeah, we don't need to worry about Ken. But great end to the episode. Speaking of that, how many times in media have we seen a character walking away from an explosion in a really cool way? So this is another one of those. So yeah, great stuff. And that's the end of the episode as well. So there we go. We'll be back next week with episode 5. Almost finished with the first season. We got 3 weeks left to do, 3 episodes left to do. So we'll continue to do those, and then eventually these episodes will start coming out from September 2nd, which the audience already knows about anyway. So there's that. No feedback at the moment. We'll see what we do with that at the end of the season. Maybe we'll do like an extra episode or something, or we'll see how that all goes once the episodes actually start coming out. So look out for that as well. I think that's everything. So you can find everything that we've got on entertainmenttalk.org. Currently at the moment, lots of gaming news happening. So me and Robert have been doing some lengthy gaming podcasts because there really is a lot of news coming out for video games at the moment. So have a look out for all that stuff. Classic Review season would have finished recently. The Jim Carrey seasons, have a look out for that. And a bunch of other stuff happening soon as well on Entertainment Talk. So have a look out for all those things as well. If you like to support Entertainment Talk and support the podcast, we are on Patreon. You can have a look at the $1 and $3 level tiers for instant podcast, ad-free podcast, and review options as well. Amazon affiliate link. If you're buying stuff on Amazon, we can get a small cut. It won't cost you extra. iTunes feeds. We are on iTunes. You can either subscribe to the Becoming Heisenberg podcast or the main Entertainment Talk feed. It's entirely up to you, but please rate, review, and subscribe to that. Speaking of iTunes, David is on there through Geektown. If you search for Geektown, you'll be able to find the weekly Geektown radio episodes. Those come out on Tuesdays. You can also find your up-to-date and reliable TV and film news on geektown.co.uk. So have a look out for all that as well. Bex is currently streaming daily on Twitch. That is Trista Bytes. So if you search for Trista Bytes, B-Y-T-E-S, so Trista, and then B-Y-T-E-S, you should be able to find that. Subscribe to her, follow her over there, get involved with all that really cool stuff. Barry is still doing horror podcasts at the moment on Talk and Stalk, so you can have a look at that for those on YouTube. So if you look for Talk and Stalk on YouTube, you should be able to find those. That's for Barry's horror podcast, lots of different cool stuff happening over there. For us as well, I'm streaming sometimes on Twitch. I'm streaming at the moment Ghost of Tsushima, and then once I'm done with that, Last of Us Part 2 New Game Plus. I don't know for when this episode comes out if I'll be resuming with Let's Play Sundays yet, but there is 50 episodes available at least at the moment, which you can go and have a look out for. Other ways you can support us, word of mouth, if you simply tell people that you know about the website and the iTunes feeds and everybody else's content, Geektown, Trista Bytes, Talk and Stalk, all that sort of stuff. Social media, you can share them on Facebook and Twitter, and if you can, put them in different Facebook groups. And that's it. Thank you all very much for listening. We'll see you next week for episode 5. And soon we'll be finished with the season. So we'll see you for all that soon. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.
Bye.